Well, it is a matchup Tuesday as the Ohio State Buckeyes begin their prep for a date on Saturday afternoon with the Purdue Boilermakers. And on paper, Ohio State is major favorites, opening up at 37.5. But you still got to play the game. There's so much to get into as the college football playoff rankings come out tonight. Ohio State gets ready for for that matchup against Purdue, and all things Buckeyes as we get you set for another week on the Buckeye Breakdown podcast.
We've got the whole crew together as we cover Ohio State with our instant analysis from Ohio State.
There's something that doesn't feel right.
Unbelievable effort from him today. Is E.J. Liddell going to crack the first team All Big Ten?
I think he can be the guy. I'm not trying to start a quarterback controversy.
He seems to have the durability. He certainly has the toughness. This is the question on a lot of people's minds here. Welcome to Buckeye Breakdown.
And welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Buckeye Breakdown podcast. Anthony Moeglin here alongside my partner and former Buckeye, Kevin Woidke. And tonight, we're getting you set with a little matchup night as Ohio State begins their preparation for the Purdue Boilermakers. And while that game does feel like it's heavily favored in Ohio State's favor, it's still going to be really important for the Buckeyes to put in a good week of work and to make sure that they protect against the upset. But before we get into any Purdue talk here, there's a lot happening in the landscape of college football as we're getting into the November month here. Action starts tonight. There's a lot going on, but most importantly, the college football playoff rankings come out. The first CFP rankings of the year come out, and it's going to be pretty much chalk to this point. But Kevin, we're finally getting to the point in the year where it's starting to feel a little serious and starting to get really kind of down to the wire here. Only a couple games left, and tonight kind of marks the beginning of the end of the season with this first round of college football rankings coming out.
Yeah, I mean, this is really when people start paying attention to the rankings because I love the AP rankings, but let's be honest, they've been obsolete for about a decade now. So coaches' rankings, cool. They got to fill it out every week. But this is really what matters, and this is where they're coming out tonight, and it'll be fun to see where we stack up in the eyes of the committee. Yeah,
they get released at 7 p.m. Eastern time, so in about a half hour or so as we record here. But you think Ohio State's going to get a pretty favorable draw here, but it's really important to remember, and we'll continue to reiterate this as this season kind of winds down. But just because Ohio State's going to be ranked maybe 2, maybe 3, that's not going to really influence their position in the final college football bracket, because you got to remember those top 4 seeds who get the bye week are all the top ranked conference champions. And as it sits today, this bracket would be pretty fun. So according to just the AP poll, which we'll get a better feel for this later on when the college football rankings come out, but just assuming that the top seeds in each conference win their conference. Right now, you'd be looking at the 1 seed being the Oregon Ducks, the 2 seed being the Georgia Bulldogs, the 3 seed being Kevin's favorite team in the country, the Miami Hurricanes. The 4 seed is the first kind of shocker, I would say, or the first fun one. It's the BYU Cougars would get that 4 seed, as they would assume that they would win the Big 12. And then the fun starts. The bracket would look like this. Ohio State would have the 5 seed. They'd be taking on Boise State at home at the Horseshoe. That would be pretty nuts. And then you would get a rematch of the you'd get Texas versus Alabama. So that would be a huge game. They haven't played yet this year, but would be an awesome SEC battle in that one. And then the 7-10 matchup would be the Penn State Nittany Lions versus Notre Dame. That would potentially be a sleeper in that one that you use that time for family time or whatever's going on. You can go do other stuff during that time. And then the 8-9 matchup would be the most fun, in my opinion. It would be the Tennessee Volunteers versus the Indiana Hoosiers. And dude, every week we talk about this, I get more and more excited for this playoff, because each one of those 12 teams, I don't think all 12 of them could compete for a national title. But regardless, that first round, just like laying that out like that, has to get you fired up if you love college football.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it'd be great. Like you'd get literally the highest and the lowest in terms of you'd watch Alabama with Sark or Texas with Sark versus Alabama with DeBoer. You'd get, Quinn Ewers /
Arch Manning.
Arch Manning, my boy, and versus, Jalen Milroe. And then you'd get Penn State and Notre Dame, which is just the complete opposite end. But it's it'd be a really fun. It'd be crazy. I think BYU would look like Dayton if they actually played the 2020 March Madness and get upset.
Yeah,
as a top 4 seed, because stand by that statement. I think Dayton would have lost in the first round. Don't get me started on how bad their defense.
Why the hate?
Their defense was atrocious that year, and I got to listen to all these Dayton guys talk to me about, we would have won it. We would have won it. I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever. But no, it's there's a little animosity there bent up from my friends that all went to Dayton. But it would be an awesome first round.
Dude, it'd be so good. And then even backing off out of that, I haven't looked at this upcoming weekend slate at large, but I know LSU and Bama play each other, and now that game's that's a knockout game. The winner keeps their season alive, and the loser goes home. Like, that's the truth of the matter. And Ohio State, Notre Dame has been playing, if they slip up one more time, they're gone. Like, all of these games now, because it's more of that NFL style, each of these teams get like 2 lives almost. And now some of them, you're going to start seeing some matchups here that are going to be highly touted as like these knockout games. And it's kind of that playoff mindset. So I think it's really cool. And that's kind of where Ohio State kind of finds himself in. The nice part is that everyone that is left on Ohio State's schedule, you'd think that Ohio State is going to be massive favorites against, including the team up north there at the end of the season. But the one game left on that schedule is going to be the Indiana Hoosiers, which they're currently the 8th seed, ranked 8th in the country. And they're going to be coming into town here in a couple weeks. But it's so important as Ohio State gets into this November month. Like, they have to really dial in that mindset, because you slip up one more time and now the fate of your season's in the hands of the committee. Like, if you lose to any of these if you lose to Purdue, you're probably out, right? But if you win out the rest of your games and you lose to maybe an Indiana, maybe you get in, maybe you don't. But if you just win out the rest of the way, that takes all the question marks out of it, and that allows you to just control your own destiny.
Absolutely. And, looking at it from that perspective, it is November. It's a big deal. I mean, it's November. This is when the season's decided, because you lose a game at the beginning of the season, you can make your way back into it. But right now, it's you drop a game now, look out. There's a chance we went out and beat Oregon in the Big Ten championship, that there could be, based on how it would probably stack up, there could be 4 Big Ten teams in the Final Four, depending on where they fall in the rankings, which would be insane. Yeah. If you're a fan of the Big Ten, that's what you would want. You'd want a 1-loss Oregon, a 1-loss Ohio State, a 1-loss Indiana, and a 1-loss Penn State. And those are the 4 that are going to go. And we'd have more than the SEC would. And somehow Miami would probably still make it, but don't even get me started on them.
I would add to that, Kevin, too, to that point is for historically, when you think of Big Ten football, you think of the hard nose, kind of run it down your throat, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. And then Ohio State started to change that, but it's kind of starting to revert back to the Michigan won the title last year. They spent an entire game running the ball for an entire half, right? That was that old school feel to it. Everywhere you look, Penn State still got that old school feel to it. But those 4 teams you just said, Ohio State, Penn State, Indiana, Oregon, all play different contrasting styles almost, where Oregon is that let it rip, kind of let that thing go. Indiana, will get into them in a couple weeks, but they love to run it up. Ohio State has that perfect balance of, hey, we can punch you in the mouth, but we can also throw it over top of your head. And then Penn State's more that old school. It's you got all the ingredients to be, to really compete against the best teams in all the other conferences. And if those 4 teams all get in, man, that's setting up really good if you're, like you said, a fan of the Big Ten and want one of those schools to try to hoist the trophy at the end.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you see it all the time. People are once it gets to this time of year, you're rooting for your conference. Mm-hmm. The most famous Wisconsin fan in sports media always talks about he's rooting for the Big Ten. Yeah. I mean, that's just what he does. I mean, that's Big Cat. He does it every time. He goes out and he like no matter who's playing, he's always rooting for the Big Ten, which is commendable. But I mean, with Wisconsin out, that's usually what happens. But nevertheless, it's just that's what it is, and that's kind of what you want, because when you get to that next level, all they talked about, anyone who would come back from the NFL would talk about everyone hyping up the SEC, all the SEC boys getting together saying every other conference isn't worth anything. So it's bragging rights too for these guys.
Mm-hmm. No doubt about it, and kind of taking the scope of their mindset from a big picture and kind of narrowing it inside the Woody Hayes facility here. I used to love when November and December would come around, because practices would start to shrink, right? It would get to, at some point, you got to get out of doing the indie drills, doing the tackling circuits. Maybe coach lets off you a little bit, gives you a couple more short stays than you would normally have as you've gotten to this point. What was your experience, Kevin? Is at any point, does Coach Day or Coach Urban or Coach Meyer, in your experience, do they ever pull off the gas? Did they ever do that as the season wore on? Because we were looking at the schedule before we started. If Ohio State were to run the table, national championship game would be on January 20th. So you still got 2.5 months left to, or maybe 2.5 months left to the final goal here. But is that something that would happen down in Columbus, or was I just at a soft program?
No, yes and no. It kind of depended on the week. It happened a lot more my freshman year after we won a national championship than it did because we returned so many of those guys that next fall, which was my first one. But no, not really. We'd still have everything the same. We'd maybe do like one up, not a full pad, but it was usually Spiders Thursday, and then maybe it was Buckeye gear, which is just the uppers for uppers and thigh pads for back-to-back days. But you couldn't take off the whole week from hitting when I expect to be ready to hit. They might have done it differently. O-line and D-line, it doesn't matter if you're full pads or not padded. It was the same practice.
It's full go, always. Yeah,
it always is. But I don't know about the receivers and soft quarterbacks and running backs.
Here I am talking about taking hits off my body. I played quarterback, for God's sake. Like, I never got touched. Never got touched during practice. But I will say, all my boys used to love it when the hitting used to stop. But, you get toward this point in the season, it's like, like you had mentioned, when you have a veteran team, you got to be kind of smart with that kind of stuff. They're not taking guys to the ground at this point in the season, but you're still doing some of that tackling stuff. But as the season does wind down, some of that stuff internally does change a little bit. You get really focused on the game plan specific stuff and less focused maybe on the everyday, the camp style feel that sometimes practice can get into. But regardless, it's a huge week for Ohio State because, Kev, you experienced this firsthand. You have to protect against the upset. There's one thing that can ruin your season, and it's a sleepwalk on Saturday afternoon. Ohio State's going to open the week as 37.5-point favorites against Purdue on Saturday. We saw it earlier in the year when Vanderbilt took down Alabama. I think that's a totally different story. It was a similar line, similar feel to it, but Vanderbilt's much better than people give them credit for. I think this Purdue team's struggling pretty mightily, and it's just so critical, man, for Ohio State not to overlook them and just get out there Saturday, take care of business, and protect against this upset.
I agree. We lost to Purdue when I was there following a big win against Penn State, but it was also in Purdue. It was a night game. It was their biggest game of the year. They had everything going in their direction. It just was a different atmosphere. You're at home for this game. You're at Wrigleyville for Northwestern, which that's 10 times better. The bullpen alone is bigger than the away locker room that Northwestern used to have. But it's just, this week especially, I don't want to look ahead to next week, but this week, you have Purdue coming in. They're not who they were with, was it Rondell Moore?
It was Rondell Moore.
They're not. They don't have that kid this year. They don't have that defensive line this year that was that big nose tackle that wreaked havoc against our offensive line. It was just it was a different team that time, and I think that this year just in all of it, in ranking them against the entire FBS, they're just not stacking up to anything this year.
They don't have horses would be a nice way to for them. I mean, it is they're they're playing with house money. They're going to come out and try to take down Ohio State and do whatever they can to do so. I think that while if you rewind a couple weeks ago, Ohio State did kind of escape with a victory against Nebraska. It felt nervy at that point. I think that that's going to be on the minds of the coaches of like, hey, the boys may have been overlooking that matchup, took it for granted, all those things. I think they're going to protect against this. And if it were me, I'm expecting that Ohio State comes out hot, come out with their hair on fire when they do take the field against Purdue. And tonight we're going to focus more on the Purdue defense versus the Ohio State offense. And for Ohio State, we just broke down the film yesterday. They did some really good things, and I think they did some things that they probably got a bunch of MAs for and a bunch of minuses for during their film session, specifically talking about the quarterback, Will Howard. I thought he was up and down. Wasn't probably one of his worst games, actually, as a Buckeye. But the silver lining in that is that while he didn't play good, they still got the victory, and that's certainly very, very positive. But for this Purdue team, this is a great opportunity for Will and our entire offense to get back on track, to feel good again going into this stretch run, because Purdue comes into the game and they love to give up points. They're 1-7 on the season, so obviously their record is not where they want to be. But more importantly, they haven't won a game since August, right? Their first game of the season was a 49-0 win over Indiana State. Then they proceeded to lose to Notre Dame. They gave up 66 points to Notre Dame. That's not good. I don't care who you are. Giving up 66 points to this version of Notre Dame is not very good. And then they fall to Oregon State, give up 38 there. They lose to Nebraska 28-10. They give up 52 to Wisconsin. Wisconsin hasn't scored on anybody. Then they play Illinois, and frankly, when we look back on the season, it might have been the game of the year. They lost to Illinois 50-49 in overtime. Then they give up 35 points to Oregon, lose 35-0. And then last week, this is the most kind of head scratcher to me. They lose 26-20 in overtime against Northwestern. So this group, Kevin, loves to give up points, and they give them up in bunches.
They do. I mean, their total defense, they're giving up about 448 yards a game. They're ranked 120th in total defense. That's including MAC teams. They're ranked 120. This is the whole FBS. They're ranked 121 in rush defense and 103 in pass defense. They're 127th in points per game, giving up about 37, and they've given up 36 touchdowns this year. This defense is the problem. Like that's just the if you're gonna boil down what Purdue's issue or what their I don't even want to call it a hole. What half of their boat is missing? It's the defense. I mean, you can say it's a hole in their ship. No, it's the whole the stern of the ship is gone, and it's the defense. I mean,
they just give up points, man, and they're easy to score on. They're easy to scheme up, and like you said, this is kind of going to be the story. Same thing we saw last year when Ohio State went over to West Lafayette. It's just Ohio State's on a totally different level than Purdue is just from a skill perspective. So that's something to just, obviously keep in the back of your mind. One of the things as we dive into who these guys are individually, their leading tackler on the team. We talk about this every week, Kev. If you're a defensive back and you lead the team in tackles, that's not good. That is not a good thing, because that means you're giving up a bunch of catches. Their leading tackler is cornerback Dylan Thieneman, and that was a guess on that one. Thieneman is as best as I could do, but 42 solo tackles, 64 total tackles for a cornerback is not very good. That's not something you write home to tell mom and dad about. But they do have a couple guys in the middle, starting with the defensive end and a linebacker who both guys, Kevin, can get after the quarterback.
I agree. They, that the linebacker, Kydron, sorry, I knew I was going to mess that up as soon as I wrote it down. Kydron Jenkins, he's got 5.5 sacks on the year, which is pretty impressive. And he's got 58 tackles. He's the second leading tackler, and then followed up by Will Helt, who's got 5 sacks and 37 total tackles. I mean, these guys are who's going to wreak havoc on probably Julian Sand or Devin Brown, but that's just I mean, I think these guys are kind of two guys on defense you're going to look out for, and those are the guys that are going to be making the plays. Like if you're looking for two guys that are going to be stopping the run and or wreaking a little bit of havoc in the backfield, those are going to be the two guys you're looking at.
Mm-hmm. And for Helt up front, he's going to be wearing number 15, and he's going to be easy to pick out. He stands at 6'6", 265 pounds. So a guy of similar build that we've seen for the past couple of weeks. We go back a couple of weeks to that Nebraska defensive line, who Ohio State had some trouble with. Right, they had some trouble with a couple guys who were in that similar size category, that 6'6" group. Now Helt is a sophomore. He hasn't quite grown into his body yet. 265, still a little bit skinny for a guy on the defensive line, but someone to certainly look out for. And Jenkins on that second level, he's like your typical bruiser type of a linebacker. Stands at 6'1", 250 pounds. Wears number 4. He's going to be that middleman of the defense, that Cody Simon, if you will, trying to fly around and make plays and compete with the Ohio State defense, or excuse me, the Ohio State offense. And then one guy to keep your eye out for in the back end, Kendrick Breedlove. All right, junior DB. He wears number 10 on the for Purdue. He gets his hands in there and does make an impact in the pass game. He's got 3 interceptions on the year, 4 pass breakups. 2 of those picks did come in that blowout against Wisconsin. But he's a guy that, all right, if there's anybody to look out for, it's number 10. Don't let him. Don't throw the ball around him. He will make you pay for it. The good part is for Ohio State, Breedlove stands at 5'11", 185. So not the biggest drink of water, a guy that if you want to give a hope ball or a 50-50 shot to Jeremiah or even to a Mecca, you can throw one up over number 10 and your guys can go get it. So Kevin, as we put a bow on this episode and this matchup preview here, what are a couple keys in your eyes as Ohio State's offense takes the field? Maybe it's improvement from last week. Maybe it's dialing some things up or tightening some things up for the weeks to come. But what are some keys that you're going to have your eyes on come Saturday afternoon for this Ohio State offense?
Yeah, I think it's just kind of, gelling more as an offensive line and keep running the ball like they did in the second half against Penn State. I mean, this is against a rush defense that is not talented. We should be running up and down the field on them like Ezekiel Elliott did against Indiana in 2015. That's kind of what I'm seeing ahead of us here. I think that we can really utilize – none of their linebackers have pass deflections, so I think it's a big G. Scott game. I think that, it's just
like
going to be
30 straight shows. It's like 30 straight.
It's all, you might as well just say this is Buckeye Breakdown featuring G. Scott hype. And then, I think that the biggest thing for me is keeping Will Howard's confidence high, especially in a game like this, helping boast it, because when Indiana comes, they're coming to play.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree. My biggest key for Ohio State is Will Howard get back to playing good. I think from a confidence perspective, I truly think that he you gain a lot when you will out a win like that. But when you watch the tape, you're like, I really did. I cost our team 14 points, and that's unacceptable. That can't happen because you face a better team, like any team in that bracket that we talked about, like they will make you pay for it. So for me, it's get Will Howard back on the right track, make him feel good, like you said, build a little bit more of that confidence up for your quarterback there because it's getting to be winning time, right? Ohio State's got their backs against the wall. They cannot afford to slip up anytime the rest of this season. So, Kevin, before we get out of here, any final thoughts as we wrap up our offensive preview, our Purdue defensive preview for the Ohio State offense?
Yeah, I want to know. We didn't plan this shirt thing.
The stripe board.
I just noticed that. You can see my face if you go back like 30 seconds. I notice it in live. No, last thing I'd say is, go out and handle business. That's what we need to do. I'll touch on it more with the defense because that's where I think we're really gonna utilize. I think they've given up 10 defensive touchdowns this year. So that's where it's going to be. We need to go out there and really dominate.
It's going to be fun. And we're going to bring you that show later in the week. That's going to be on Thursday night, where we preview Ohio State's defense against the Purdue offense. So how can you be alerted for that? Subscribe to the channel. Hit that subscribe button. We do appreciate your support. We appreciate you jumping in with us tonight. We got so much content on our site. Jump back a couple of videos. You'll see a film breakdown that Kevin and I did looking at that Purdue game from Saturday, getting into the nitty gritty, the details of each play. So that's on the page. And we also have all the press conferences, both just the straight media availability for all the players, but as well, we have the head coach press conferences and all the quarterback stuff. All that stuff's on our channel. So hit that subscribe button. Also, head over to our website, si.com/college/Ohio State, where you'll find all of our written work. And the guys I know are working hard there, providing you a ton of content to get you through the week. It's going to be an easy week to get through. You hit on it. We didn't touch on it, but Maction starts tonight. We're going to have football all week long. It's getting into the fun part of the season. There's tons of football on, tons of sports on, but we'll help you get through the week here on our YouTube channel and over on si.com. So appreciate you hanging out with us tonight. For my partner, Kevin Woidke, I'm Anthony Moeglin. And until next time, we'll join you again in a couple days here on the Buckeye Breakdown podcast.